So good day everyone. For those who will listen and watch this discussion, good day. I am Rolando Carawana Jr., Bachelor of Culture and Arts in Education students. So for today's topic is about climate change. So before I proceed to my main discussion, let me ask you first some question. What is climate and climate change? What are the possible effect and impact towards our environment as well as the human? How can we adapt and prevent this issue? So in this discussion, all of those questions will be answered, and I hope that you will you will learn something. So before I proceed to my main discussion, let me first give you some photo analysis in which in the in this slide, it will show you in the left side about the climate and the right side on the weather. So climate is a long-term average weather pattern in one place, while the weather is the condition at one particular time and place, including temperature and rainfall. Climate, by the way, influenced by slow changes in the ocean, the land, the orbit of the Earth about the Sun, and the energy output of the Sun, while the weather can change very rapidly from day to day and from year to year. Climate, is fundamentally controlled by the balance of energy of the Earth and its atmosphere, while weather is the changes involve shifts in temperature, precipitation, winds, and clouds. So there are five types of climates in the Philippines. These are the tropical rainforest, tropical monsoon, tropical savanna, and humid subtropical and oceanic. So, tropical rainforest is the are rainforests that grow in tropical rainforest climate zones with no dry season. While tropical monsoon are which in the Philippines have a hot tropical monsoon climate and that is produced across the archipelago by two primary seasons, mainly wet from May to November and dry from November to April. Tropical savanna. The relative humidity in the Philippines is high, making hot temperature feel much hotter. Humid subtropical is characterized by high temperatures, oppressive humidity, and heavy rains. And lastly, oceanic. The Philippines is located in the western Pacific Ocean, surrounded by naturally warm waters that will likely warm more as average sea surface temperatures rise. This is a natural pattern. The water surface heats as it absorbs sunlight. So, what is climate change? So, climate change is a change in the usual weather found in a place. This could be a change in how much rain a place usually gets in a year, or it could be a change in a place's usually temperature for a month or season. According to United Nations Framework and Convention on Climate Change, a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere. And also, according to Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, any change is in climate over time, whether due to natural variability, is a result of human activity. So after knowing and understanding what a climate change is, what are the possible effects of climate change? Number one effect of climate change is the increase in sea surface temperature. Sea surface temperature has increased as the amount of heat absorbed by the oceans has surged in the past few decades, causing marine heat waves and contributing to more intense storms, sea level rise, sea ice melt, and widespread ecosystem change. The next effect of climate change is the increase in sea level. Sea level rise means a condition where the seawater's volume of the oceans of the world is increasing. Wild waves and eroding coastlines we see in today's age are just some of the effects of sea level rise. It destroys the ecosystem in coastal area and resulting material loss for human. According to the assessment report, global average sea level rose at an average rate of 1.8 millimeter per year over 1961 to 2003, or a total of 0.17 meter for the 21st century. Other experts projected that it will increase from 1.4 degrees Celsius to 5.8 degrees Celsius during the 21st century, leading to an increase in the sea level from 18 to 59 centimeter by 2100. In the Philippines, under A1B scenario, main annual temperature are expected to rise by about 0.9 degrees Celsius to 1.2 degrees Celsius for 2020, and 1.7 degrees Celsius to 2.2 degrees Celsius by 2050. The increase of temperature will cause the increase in sea level. So the next effect of climate change is the changes in rainfall pattern. Changes in precipitation patterns will impact people and ecosystem by altering the availability of water throughout the year. The predicted impacts of altered precipitation patterns include floods and droughts will become more frequent and more severe. Climate change is due to global warming, and I do believe in that. Current climate change encompasses both global warming and its effects on Earth's weather patterns. There have been earlier times of climate change, but the current changes are noticeably faster and are not the result of natural factors. Earth has warmed and cooled numerous times during its lengthy history. Climate has altered as a result of tiny alterations in the planet's orbit, changes in the atmosphere or surface, or variations in the sun's radiation. However, However, throughout the last century, another force has begun to alter Earth's climate, which is humanity. According to Rivik, climate change has occurred in the past without the assistance of humanity. We know about previous temperature thanks to evidence left in tree rings, glacier ice layers, ocean sediments, coral reefs, and sedentary rocks strata. For example, air bubbles trapped in a glacier ice contain microscopic samples of Earth's atmosphere, providing scientists with history of greenhouse gases dating back over 800,000 years. The chemical composition of ice reveals information about the average world temperature. So, after knowing it, I indeed I indeed believe that climate change is due to global warming. It's because of the human activities that continues occurring in this present situation. So, we already done talking about its effect. So let's go on the climate change impact. The first climate change impacts is that directly affect is in the coastal areas, mainly the bleaching of the coral reefs. Coral bleaching can occur as sea temperature rise when the water temperature rises too high. Corals eject the algae or the zooxanthellae that live in their tissues, causing the coral to turn entirely white, which is observable in the given figure of this slide. Next is the increase of ocean acidity. Ocean acidification is a change in ocean water qualities that can be damaging to plants and animals living under the ocean. Scientists have discovered that the ocean's water is turning acidic as it collects carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Aside from it has a severe impact to the coastal areas, climate change also affect the agricultural sector. It reduces global food supplies. Reduced global food supplies, on the other hand, is limiting worldwide output of staples such as rice and wheat. And when crop yields were converted into edible calories, the actual food on people's plates will we discovered that climate change is already reducing food supplies, particularly in food insecure developing countries. Another is the higher food prices. Global food prices are rising as a result of rising fuel prices, harsh weather which is observable in the present or modern times, and this COVID-19 that continues spreading in this situation. So that is the impact of climate change to agricultural sector. How about biodiversity? So the impact of climate change to the biodiversity is that it increased outbreak of pests and diseases. Higher temperature caused by global warming, and we all know that climate change is due to global warming, primarily from increase of carbon dioxide, will imply that more bugs will survive in the winter, causing the more pests and the occurrence of different diseases that can cause and harm health. The other thing and the effect or the impact of climate change to the diversity is the changes in species distribution. Climate change is influencing species distribution through changes in growth, reproduction, and immortality, with more pronounced alteration expected in the future decades. Climate change can have an immediate impact on species distribution, such as the drought, floods, wind, as well as the indirect impact, which are the temperature and weather-related changes in pattern of wildfire, insects, and disease outbreaks. So these are the impacts and the effects of climate change towards our environment and the different aspects in our community and as well as the threat to human. So how can we mitigate or and adapt in this issue? So in order to mitigate climate change, we have to practice energy efficiency. This is by simply doing some simple tasks such as not too much using of energy or altering some activities without using energy. Greater use of renewable energy, replacing greenhouse gas emitting fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas with clean, renewable energies like solar, wind, and geothermal is a perfect way to practice energy efficiency. With renewables becoming the cheapest form of new electricity generation across 2/3 of the world in 2019, compared to just 1% of the world 5 years ago. This measure has quickly gone from a dream to everyday reality. Retrofitting old buildings to make them more energy efficient. So, retrofitting old buildings to make them more energy efficient. The term retrofit involves modification to existing commercial buildings that may decrease energy demand, thus reducing emissions that can cause climate change. Efficient means of transport implementation, such as electric vehicles, shared cars. So, replacing traditional internal combustion vehicles with electric is a best option to mitigate climate change. Just like renewables, electric vehicles are looking better than ever. As Bloomberg NAF describes, over 2 million electric vehicles were sold in 2018, up from just a few thousand in 2010. Planting more trees. Planting more trees is the simplest yet brings the biggest impact in mitigating climate change. Planting trees and preserving forests so they can absorb and store more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere can mitigate climate change. Just like the other strategies, in recent years, tree planting has seen unprecedented action by governments and private groups alike. In 2017, for example, the Indian state of Madhya Pradesh planted 66 million trees in just one day. So before I proceed to on how we adapt or what are the possible ways to adapt climate change. So mitigation or climate change mitigation, by the way, is a human intervention to reduce sources or enhance the sink of greenhouse gases that causes climate change. This means avoiding and reducing emissions of heat trapping of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere to prevent planet from warming to more extreme temperatures. The main goal of mitigation is to avoid significant human interference with the climate system. So, the adaptation to climate change. Climate change adaptation is defined by IPCC as the process of adjustment from the word itself adapt, adjustment, to actual or expected climate and its effect. This means altering our behavior, systems, and our ways of life to protect our families, our economies, and the environment in which we live from the impact of climate change. It is a matter of adapting to life in changing climate, and it involves adjustment to the actual and expected future climate. The goal of adaptation measures are to reduce vulnerability to harmful effects of climate change. Example is the rising sea levels, more intense extreme weather events, and food insecurity. So here are the ways to adapt to climate change. First on the list is the building seawalls, elevating infrastructure, or retreating from low-lying coastal areas altogether. In the US, for example, cities like Charleston, Houston, Miami, and San Francisco, to name a few, already have $1 billion investment plan to protect their sea-bound populations. Next is reducing and recycling water use due to drought. For instance, Spain has lost 20% of its fresh water in just the past 20 years, has made significant changes to its national water policy, using prescribed fires to prevent uncontrollable wildfires. Take the south, take the southeastern United States, the region of the country with the highest use of prescribed fires. It's no surprise this practice is increasing in the region given that by NOAA suggests that the risk of very large fire weeks will increase by 300%, favoring drought-tolerant crops like rice, coffee, and maize, just as many African countries have done response to decreasing rain. Mitigation and adaptation are two responses that can we do to combat the impact of the climate change crisis. To differentiate the two, here's the simple analogy from TRCP 2019. So when we say adaptation again, these are the adjustment that we must do in order to address climate change. The mitigation are the things that we must practice in order to prevent the climate change, which is causing harm to our environment and in the human aspects as well. So I hope you earn some knowledge about my discussion. So here are the sources that I have from creating this PowerPoint presentation. I hope you'll learn something, and thank you for listening and good day.